Hey everybody, it is another Microsoft Virtual Academy. It's MVA time. Scott Hunter is here. I'm Scott Hanselman, and we're very happy to share with you for the next 2 days a relaxed introduction to ASP.NET 5. We're going to go through basically everything from the very beginning. This is a 101 level course, but it's not necessarily for the absolute beginner. Maybe you're a PHP developer and you're just thinking about checking out ASP.NET. Maybe you've been doing web forms, you've been doing MVC 3 or 4. Maybe for a while you have been seeing that ASP.NET 5 is happening, but you haven't really dug in. We're going to try to cover that. We're just going to do it in a very gentle way. Scott Hunter, this is a big thing, ASP.NET 5. We've started from scratch, but it's also very familiar.
Yeah, well, I like to step back a step. And
okay.
Let's just talk about, if you're here for the first time and you're learning how to build web with ASP.NET, what I like to think about is we're in a world now of mobile devices and web. That really has kind of taken over the software industry. I mean, pretty much all of us are on a browser all day or on a device all day, and even on that device, we're probably on maybe the web on the device as well. But HTML crosses all boundaries. Mm-hmm. Whether you're on a desktop, whether you're on a tablet, whether you're on a mobile phone, you're probably going to hit web. And so, we think web is super important, and I think everybody should learn web. If you're doing programming and you're asking yourself, "Hey, what should I learn?" Learn web, because with web you can actually access mobile, tablet, desktop, everything. Versus, it's a great first step to learn anything that touches every aspect of programming.
I've always liked to say, learn JavaScript and learn a systems language. So if you can create HTML, if you can create JavaScript, you can make services that can talk to mobile applications. If you can create HTML, you can create HTML that is going to work on a 30-inch screen or on a 4-inch screen.
And I know you guys are going to talk about some of this today when you guys talk about Bootstrap and stuff later on today.
Absolutely.
And then I also like it when I think about web, I also think about SPA apps.
Apps, single-page applications.
Single-page applications. These are applications using a front-end class library. It might be AngularJS, could be Ember, could be Knockout. There's a variety of frameworks that help you do this. And if you look at modern SPA-type apps, I think of like Twitter as an example of one of these. Facebook you could challenge as one of these. A lot of the Outlook or
Outlook.com, Gmail,
apps like this.
Applications.
And these are web apps that actually look like desktop apps and act like desktop apps. If you actually use them, you could kind of be tricked into thinking, hey, this is really a desktop application or a mobile application, but it looks, it's web.
Yeah, if you remove the Chrome, if you went full screen, you can live in those applications and spend the whole day. Trello, another great example.
Exactly, another great example. And that's, as you go through the learnings today, that's another part of, I think, learning the web is it's going to enable you, as our devices get faster, and web becomes even more prevalent on these devices. If you're learning these technologies, you're learning SPA, you're learning ASP.NET, it's going to empower you to be in a place where you can actually write these apps that look like desktop apps or look like native apps on a device across all the platforms, but doing it with one app versus writing a Windows, an Android, and iOS version of the app. Mm-hmm. And so today, I think the whole point of today is hopefully we want you to build your first web app with .NET. Mm-hmm. And we're going to show you some of the benefits of building apps on .NET. What's cool about the world we're in today is when we first started building ASP.NET years ago, it was purely a Windows and a Visual Studio scenario. And what's cool about the ASP.NET 5 that you want to talk about today is we're different now. We now are a web technology that runs everywhere. We run on Windows, we run on Mac, we run on Linux. You don't have to use Visual Studio anymore. I think you'll get a better experience with it, but you can easily do anything that you see today, build these same applications on a Mac using Visual Studio Code, using Sublime, using Vim, using whatever editor you want to do. So that's the thing about ASP.NET 5 is we now are enabling you to use whatever device, whatever server, whatever tool set that you want to use. And so you don't have to come in here trying this training feeling like you're stuck on Windows, stuck on Visual Studio. I think this is really the open web.
Right, and over the next maybe 6 months, we'll say, we're going to end up doing 3 virtual academies, okay? So this virtual academy is Introduction to ASP.NET 5. This is our 101, the beginning of 200 level, getting people started. We're going to use Windows, and we're going to use Visual Studio. But as Scott said, everything that we're doing can be done cross-platform. The next MVA after this will be an advanced deep dive into some of the internals of what's going on. We'll spend an entire virtual academy talking about advanced techniques, scaling, going into production, things like that. Then we're going to do one entirely dedicated to cross-platform. So we'll spend time at the command line. We'll spend time doing Notepad, Visual Studio Code, Atom, all of the different things that you can do on a Mac, on Linux. We'll deploy to Linux. We'll use Docker. But those are advanced techniques. So we're going to do 101, we're going to do advanced, and then we're going to do entirely a cross-platform one. And then at that point, you'll have a library of ASP.NET virtual academies. And then I would also encourage you to look at other virtual academies that have techniques like Bootstrap or Angular. So we'll put together a series of links for you to explore as you want to get deeper into those kind of those eddies and currents.
And then as we were talking about being able to write your applications across Windows, Mac, and Linux, I think another important characteristic of ASP.NET 5 is you have to realize it's open. The web is open. The web is full of open standards, and we thought it was a super important and critical thing to make ASP.NET open as well. And so ASP.NET ASP.NET 5 is completely open source. You can go to www.github.com/ASP.NET/home, and that's the homepage of ASP.NET 5. And from there, you can find all the projects that our team's working on. You can go watch the pull request happen. You can watch the comments from the team as people submit issues. And so completely fully open. And it doesn't just stop there. We didn't think that having ASP.NET 5 as fully open was enough. We actually took the .NET framework and have completely open sourced the .NET framework. So there's a new version of the .NET framework that ASP.NET 5 supports. It's called .NET Core. And .NET Core is also on GitHub. And all of the source code is public. And right now, that team is in the process of doing a lot of work to enable the cross-platform work. So they're working really hard and adding the Linux and Mac support. And so if you go watch the pull requests happening in GitHub on that, you'll see those things being a lot of the stuff going on there. But that's a new thing as well for Microsoft, is basically the web is open, ASP.NET is open, and .NET is open. So everything you see today is completely open source. You can go and download, modify the source code. I don't know if they're going to demo this today, but one of the really cool tricks you can do now is, because the framework's fully open source, they might show later today where you can actually download the source code for the framework, and as you're working on your application, you can use Visual Studio and debug all the way through the framework into your actual code. You can even change the framework code if you want and ship your own version of it. So it's a change as well.
Yeah, it's more than just a change. It's a mindset change that we're going to hopefully express to people over the course of not just this virtual academy, but other ones. But the idea that you don't necessarily have to go and look at the docs. You could just step into the next line of code, and that next line of code may go from your code into Microsoft code, and that code is open source. So we're going to use that as an on-ramp for you to understand that you can debug this code, you can read it as reference, you can explore it, you can build it, make private builds, as you said. You can have your own personal copy of ASP.NET. And in the future, if you're a little bit more advanced, you could theoretically have your own private copy of the .NET framework itself, or even the CLR. So there's a big wide world open to you right now.
And as we opened ASP.NET and .NET, we took it a step further. Scott and I both work on the ASP.NET website, and that's where a lot of the documentation for ASP.NET goes as well. And as we entered this open source world, we want to enable our customers to provide us feedback on the docs, even potentially help us fix the docs. And so we've actually open sourced the documentation as well. So you can go to docs.asp.net, and from that website, you can go look at the documentation that we have. And we're being very transparent. If you go to that site today, you'll see that some of the documentation is completed, and you'll see that some of the documentation's got an icon next to it showing that it's not ready yet. And the whole point of that is we've got folks working on it. If you are, have been using ASP.NET for years and you want to help us, feel free to go find anything that's got a gear, a wrench icon next to it, and go to GitHub, submit a pull request, and help us work on the docs. I mean, that's part of being truly open, is You can see us work on the framework and the docs and everything in the public, and we'd love to have the community help us out. And it goes beyond that. Even though if you look at the topics in the docs, they're mainly today about core ASP.NET and how to get started and stuff like that. But if you're an open source author out there and have written your own library and it's tightly bound to ASP.NET, we will open the docs up to having those kinds of things in there as well. It's not just about using Entity Framework, our data stack. If there's another data stack that works great with ASP.NET, we're more than happy to actually have that in our doc tree as well.
Absolutely. And if you go over to the docs in the lower left-hand corner, one of the things that we're worth pointing out is that you can actually go and download a PDF that is all of these docs for offline reading. And you want to think about these docs as a living documentation. That's a snapshot PDF of that moment in time. But if you make edits and you get involved, then this has what's called continuous integration. We're actually having these docs built and updated automatically. So you make a change, and that gets into the docs, and then tomorrow that PDF will be updated. You can also get EPUB and put that on your Kindle if it makes you happy as well.
Right. Yeah. And we're even exploring maybe taking those doc sets and printing them once every year or so and having them available even at booksellers.
Yeah.
One more thing I wanted to talk about around ASP.NET 5 is both Scott and I work on the Azure team. And Azure is the Microsoft cloud. And so we think cloud computing is a huge thing moving forward. In the old days, I'd have to go ask my IT team to give me a website and a SQL database and all these things. And with the emergence of the cloud, it's great for developers. Instead of having to install that software on your machine, you can just go right to azure.com, get a free account, get your own SQL database, get 10 free websites, and use those for building your web applications. And so it makes life a lot easier because you don't have to put that stuff in your own machine. Maybe you don't have rights to put that stuff in your own machine. And so the cloud is a changer in the space. And I think you guys are going to show a little bit of that today at the end when you do some publishing to the cloud.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got a lot of choice. You can certainly publish to Azure. It'll work great. Just right-click, publish. And of course, when we start getting into cross-platform, we'll be able to go and publish to a Linux host. We can publish to Docker. We can FTP. We'll show you all of that. You've got a lot of choice.
And so as part of that, as you start going through and learning ASP.NET, one of the things we also want to point out is we've written ASP.NET to be cloud ready. And that means a couple of things for us. That means that things like your connections to your databases, your secrets and stuff, we've got great ways of letting you put those into your ASP.NET application in a way that you won't accidentally put those up on GitHub if you're uploading your source code there. We've got great ways of taking some of the features in ASP.NET around. There's features called Session. Session allows you to retain state between requests. If you've ever gone to a retail store and put something in your shopping cart, Session is what's actually letting that shopping cart stay as you move around the pages with the items in it. And we're building all of these things with a cloud-first attitude. If you're building a website and you want to have high performance, you might want to do caching. And so caching is a built-in feature in ASP.NET 5, and it's very easy to replace the built-in caching with cloud caching using things like Redis. And so ASP.NET applications are designed for your configuration, for your session, for your cache to all be cloud ready. They're first-class features in the product. And so as the team today shows you ASP.NET, always think about the fact that it's ready for the cloud. You can build it locally on your machine, but when you want to push to the cloud, it's there, it's ready, and it's got great support for Azure.
Cool. And then the last thing that I want to point out to folks is that ASP.NET is a community. It is not just an open source community, but it's a community of like-minded developers that all work on these things. And we have a community stand-up. So if you go to live.asp.net, you can join into our stand-up. This is done on every Tuesday with travel schedules. You can go ahead and add this to your calendar. And you can see all of the previous episodes. So for example, at the time of this recording, we had a Beta 7 update. And this is just the team and myself having a chat. We talk about the things of the day that are going on, schedule updates. Here we talked about getting it running on a Raspberry Pi. We had a little hackathon and we had it running on a Raspberry Pi. So this is an opportunity for you to get involved, to ask questions of the team, and we'll address those questions. So you could take a look at live.asp.net. And then in this MVA, on the second day, Damien Edwards, who wrote this application, is going to do a walkthrough. We're going to basically look at this real cloud-deployed ASP.NET 5 application. What are some of the problems that Damien had? What are some of the challenges? This has all been open sourced. So while it is a simple application, it is one that has to scale on every Tuesday when people hit it. It does real work. It calls web services. It has authentication. It has a database behind it. So we're going to learn about ASP.NET, and then we're going to dig into a real-world application on day 2 of this virtual academy.
You know, another fun thing that you might want to show is, as a web framework, one of the things that's important to us is to have a very fast framework. And so a big push of the team right now is to have ASP.NET be one of the fastest web frameworks out there. And if you go to github.com, whack ASP.NET, whack performance, we actually now have the performance. We have a performance lab in our team room where we're actually building. Scroll down and see if that's the right one. That's not actually the right one.
Okay.
It's benchmarks.
Benchmarks. All right.
And what's cool is what we do is we have a lab in our team room, and scroll down here. Mm-hmm. And what we've got is we're actually running ASP.NET against Windows machines, against Linux machines, and we're also looking at some of our competition. So you're going to find things like Node.js in here, you're going to find Scala in here, and you're going to see the performance of our frameworks versus Node versus Scala, not only on Windows machines, but also on Linux machines. And one of the things you can already see here is you'll see that ASP.NET is already faster than Node.js here. But we're not as fast as some of the things like Scala and some of the Java frameworks out there. Mm-hmm. But one of the goals of ASP.NET 5 is to be in the upper echelon of high-performance websites. The cool thing is these benchmarks are in GitHub, so you can actually download them and run them yourself and try them. Our lab is a little crazy. We're actually running 10 gigabit network hardware because 1 gig network cards aren't fast enough for us. And we're running some pretty beefy machines with lots of RAM and lots of CPUs.
So I suppose if you have a 32 gigabyte machine lying around in your garage, you should certainly get involved. But it's fun to read these things.
Yeah, well, the point here is if you're looking and you're thinking about ASP.NET because you're looking at this course, I want you to point out that the performance is super important to us, mm-hmm. and we're as transparent about the performance as we are anything else. You can go live and see us, and those numbers you see today, go watch them a month from now and a month from now, and you'll see they're going to go up every single time. We've done a lot of work in ASP.NET 5 to optimize the framework. We use a lot less memory than we used to before, and our request per second is already way up compared to previous versions of the framework.
Okay, so what we've learned here, ASP.NET 5 is open, it's being developed in the open, and it's an opportunity for you to get involved and even put in a pull request if you like to. We are an open community. The docs are in the open. Performance matters, and ASP.NET 5 runs anywhere, and that it is also cloud ready.
And you know, as you go through the course today and tomorrow, what I hope is you explore ASP.NET 5, and we would love to have your feedback. So Scott will have ways of getting feedback to us, but we'd love to hear your feedback on what other trainings would you like to hear. You know, we're going to start today, as Scott said, on an intro to ASP.NET. We have an advanced one coming up. We have a cross-platform one coming up. We'd love to have feedback. Do you want courses on writing client-side applications with ASP.NET on the back end? Would you like classes on building a mobile app on an iOS, Android, Windows device that talks to an ASP.NET backend? Would you like something on how to scale your application in the cloud? So we're here for you guys. So please watch the course, give us feedback, and we'll make more.
Cool. So we'll take a short break, and we'll come back, and we'll get started with ASP.NET.